appreciate you all coming out this morning. What I want to try to do today is to give you a sense of what happened, why it happened, what's going to happen in the future, and more importantly than that, how are we going to adjust to it? Because it is going to take an effort on our part to adjust to the cuts that are there. I've only got 3 slides today. They got a lot of numbers on them. I did not intend for you to have to go through. If you want these, I can certainly give them to you where you can pour over. I only put these up here because I wanted you to see what the bill pattern looked like and some immediate misconceptions that can be made, especially by state senators, about the amount of funding that's shown here and what the real impact is on the institution. And I've got one slide that Galen has worked on that actually shows a line-by-line comparison of a year ago to the current year, and you'll be able to see very clearly from there where the cuts have occurred. Now, guys, we've been heading in this direction for some time. There has been a lot of discussion, not just in the state, but in the nation, about the cost of higher education. A lot of discussion about rising tuition. And we've got some juggernauts in the state, like the University of Texas system and the Texas A&M system, who have, in the eyes of some of our legislators, especially on the Senate side, a lot of additional money that they have available that they could be spending, and they're not spending it, especially on the regional institutions. And there's a misconception there, and I want to try to explain that to you as well. Larry, we got lots of seats on the
front seats.
We may need you to break out and sing the alma mater.
That's right.
When we started into the session, prior to every session, we have to submit what is called a legislative appropriation request. And we did that. And we were warned at that time to prepare for about a 3% cut. But we were also given a backup warning to prepare for a potential 10% cut. And of course, we all thought, myself included, well, we won't get that far, but 3% maybe, we'll see. So we submitted all of our materials as requested. Our performance on the formula, as we know the formula, and you'll see in a minute why I refer to the formula as we know it. We did well. We grew. Semester credit hours grew. In another day and another time, we would have probably been looking at some nice plus numbers in a time when special items were not scrutinized the way they were in this last session, and in a time when the formula was the primary way of determining what higher education funding was going to be. In fact, in some numbers that Dr. Hill, unless you just like standing against the wall, we got seats up there. Maybe lose my train of thought. Said great job.
Sorry.
We were doing well against them.
Yeah. Well, in the numbers that the A&M system released just the other day, and a kind of a follow-up press release on the cuts and so forth. They listed growth rates between 2014 and 2016 for all the A&M schools. Highest growth percentage was San Antonio, 21%. Second highest was us, 13%. Unfortunately, our growth of 13% was only a little over 300 students. Texas A&M's growth of 3 or 4% was like 3,000 students, and there's only so many pieces of the pie. and those differences make a difference. Nevertheless, the whole thing jumped the tracks as we got into the legislative session. The House put forth a bill that looked like previous bills, previous legislation, and in that original House bill, we would have been looking at break-even. We would have not lost anything, we would have not gained anything, but we were at about a break-even status. I think most of you are aware what the Senate did. The Senate bill came out and we would have taken a 47% cut in general revenue. Because what they did was to take all special items out of everybody's bill. Everybody's. Because they have decided that special items are a bad thing. They're very political. Many of them have been in place for years and years and years, and they shouldn't have been. They should have been phased out. The bottom line is it's a chunk of money that could be cut. And the precarious situation that higher education has always been in the state of Texas is that we are the largest piece of unprotected funding in the state budget. Public education, you get a certain amount of protection. You gotta pay for the students. If the student numbers are going up, you've got to make sure the school districts have their funding. You got to pay for Medicaid. You got to pay for prisons. You got to pay for a lot of things. Higher education is discretionary, and it's a big pot of discretionary funding. And this is not the first time that we've been down this road with higher education in the state of Texas and something like this occurring. So the Senate went on its way of saying we need to dramatically reduce these special items. We want to get rid of them completely by the next legislative session. Well, to do that, you've got to have a whole new way of funding higher education, because those special items make up a large portion of virtually every institution's revenue coming from the state. Now, there are some, Texas A&M is a good example, and there are a few others, that have very few special items. There are others that have been driven by special items. Now, what have special items been for? Not in every case, but in most cases, they have been for specific programs to be started and operated. And I guess there was an intent, it would depend on which legislative session you happen to be in. I guess there was an intent that at some point those would be phased out. One of the reasons we took the hit that we did is because we have a very large special item called transition funding. And it was provided to us in San Antonio and to the University of North Texas at Dallas when we came into being. That this was funding that it would be required to start these institutions up, to operate them for a period of time, and unfortunately there was never any clear indication of how long that would be, exactly how those would be phased out. There is one line, and I'll point it out to you in just a second, in the bill pattern that says we would keep those until we got to 6,000 FTE. Well, we're still under 2,000 FTE. So we technically would have a long way to go. But there was no mechanism put in place to begin to phase those out. And so with this legislative session, we faced the challenge of having those things go away overnight. And the first Senate bill, which cut 47%, would have eliminated everything. All the special items. We have two special items. The largest one by far is for transition funding. The second one is for our operation in the East Williamson County Higher Education Center. And That would have been removed also. So, fast forward to the end of the legislative session. House and Senate go into conference, the conference committee. They reach several compromises. One is that at least for one more year, or one more biennium, we will use the formula as it was originally intended, and we will use special items, but all of higher education is going to have to take a cut. The larger your special item, the larger your cut is likely to be. Unless you're an institution that's got a declining enrollment. And so when the final bill patterns came out, most institutions took a cut of some sort. Handful grew. A handful were left at zero. A couple of those, probably most of those, were rescued by someone. And that's politics, guys. You'd say, well, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. Believe me, if I had found a white knight, we would have tried to do exactly the same thing. So I don't blame them, because it's the way the game is played. But you've got to have somebody who's got a tremendous amount of influence with the decision makers, like the lieutenant governor, to be able to do that. So virtually everybody else, 20-something institutions took a cut. 10 of us took a 10% cut. The other cuts varied from as little as 1.4% to as much as 8 or 9%, depending on how the formula flowed for the institutions. And we're still left kind of scratching our heads about what is the future going to be. I'll talk about that before we stop, but let's focus a little bit on where we are as an institution. One of the reasons I put this up here, this is the beginning section of the budget bill for us, for both the last biennium, this is the last biennium, 16-17, and the current biennium, which is 18-19. Now, I know a lot of you can't see this, but if you look at this bottom line right here, total method of financing, in 16-17, ours totaled out at about 17.5. Down here in 18-19, ours totals out at about 18.8. And if the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee were to walk in here today, she would probably say, Dr. Nigliazzo, what are you complaining about? You're getting $1.3 million a year in the next biennium, more than you've received so far, more than you received the previous biennium. Folks, that's all in one pot. The reason that's fair. And it's called building through. Tuition revenue bond numbers, and I'll point them out to you in just a moment, are at $4.5, $4.6 million. And so, yes, we are overall going to receive more funding. But where the rubber meets the road for us, our daily operations, we're taking approximately a $1.5 million a year cut. And the actual bill shows it at about 1.3, a little over 1.3. When you look at the total numbers in here and how lines can be used, it ends up being about $1.5 million for us. So I wanted you to be able to see this just as an example. I mean, as everybody's bill pattern comes out looking like this at the beginning. I surely don't expect you to read this. This is the entire bill. Those numbers that I was just talking about were up here. And in here you see different goals. First one is instruction and operations. Second one is infrastructure support. Third one is to provide non-formula support. made some gains in other places. Non-formula support is where we took the hit. Transition funding, which has been over right at $6 million, it's got 3.8. I'll show you numbers that you can see much more clearly in just a moment. Institutional enhancement, which was $500,000, was cut. Our East Williamson County special item is still there, but it was cut from $750,000 to $400,000. And I think we're gonna have to cut that even further in order to get the budget to balance. But in these bills, there are certain expenditures that can only be used in certain ways. You can't take money out of that tuition revenue bond pot to build that building and move it over and use it for operations. I can't take money over here. Here's another section right here that isn't included in this. And this is employee benefits. Well, they gave us an increase in employee benefits. But we can't go take those employee benefits and use those to pay your salaries for what they said go on, employee benefits. And in the process of cutting our overall budget, they also cut something here called FTE. I'm going to let Ms. Nunn explain to you about FTE. What it is, it was cut for every 100,000 or so that they cut, they reduced our FTE. Our FTE has been, what, Galen, about 128. And now it's 96. So if you would explain to the group what that means.
So on the FTEs, it's how many people we are allowed to pay out of state funds that we receive out of the appropriation money. The problem that we run into is that we receive a lot more benefit money than we do for the FTEs. So we need to increase our FTEs, and the legislature has a way for us to do that, which is through our Board of Regents. When we turn in our budget, we have to request an increase in FTEs from our Board of Regents, which they have to approve, and then they combine it into one big request and send it to the Legislative Budget Board. So one challenge that we have, because we don't want to give money back to the legislature, is to take all of the benefit money that we are going to receive and back into it. Put as many employees as we can into that to make sure that we use all of the benefit money back. But the benefit money is also proportional. So what that means is, in the next biennium, that benefit money is 88% of our benefits. The university has to come up with the other 12% for benefits, which is okay, and we did get an increase, but also our costs increased. So what we're trying to do is put as many people into the special item, the appropriation money, and use up the benefits, but then we're using our money, our tuition money, to help make us meet that goal. So.
And we can automatically increase it by 10% without approval. But beyond that, we have to have Board of Regents approval.
Okay. Galen, real quick, to get the total money, we have to multiply price per unit times number of units. Do we lose number of units or the recompense per unit?
If we lose it, if we don't, and it doesn't go by unit, this is your pot of money. If we give you $5 million at the end of the year, if you only spend $4.5 million, the state pulls that $500,000 back.
Oh, and that original pot is not derived in this meta.
No.
Meta, okay.
I wish we knew what the technology was. Okay, again, my intent is not to get us buried in all of the detail of the budget bills, But I wanted to give you some sense of what these budget bills look like. And you've got lots of money in there, like TRBs, like the benefits. It can only be used for one purpose. These lines cannot be moved around. And you say, well, we don't really need that much, so let's move a little bit of this over here. We cannot do that. So we try to find a way to line up our employees so that we can generate enough on our FTE side to be able to use up all of that benefit money, so that we're not having to pay for those benefits out of tuition. So, better way to look at all of this, hopefully a clearer way for you, is to look at this. I know the numbers are still small, but you can certainly see the bands. This is all of those sections that were in that budget bill, and they're broken out. And the bottom line is, if there's a green band across there, we got an increase. If there is a brown band across there, we got a decrease. If there is a yellow band across there, it stayed the same. And while you see some nice increases up here compared to a year ago or in the last biennium, here's where all of the special item funding is right here. You see what this decrease is, and you see what the total damage is right there, a little over 1.5 million. Now, if you dump in the insurance money that we just showed you, then that deficit goes down to about 1.2. But this money will not help us make up the difference up here, because it can only be used for one thing, and that's the benefits. So the challenge for us, guys, is to adjust our budgets to where we can accommodate that cut. And that's the process that we're in right now. We've got to turn in our budget, Galen, a week from Friday. And so Galen has been working literally night and day to try to put the numbers together to make sense. She's been interacting not just with VPs, but with department heads and deans and what have you, and we will continue that. I think everybody has a good understanding of what we're facing. Now, is this an impossible task? No, it is not. But it is going to take some cooperation, and it is going to take some understanding that certain budgets are going to have to be reduced. East Williamson County Higher Education Center. Now, in a way, since we lost $350,000 right off the top, well, there's $350,000 that we won't be spending next year off of that 1.5. But as I just mentioned, I've asked that we reduce it even more. We've got to maintain a presence in Williamson County, because Representative Gonzalez went to bat for us to try to keep some money in there, and since he was successful, we cannot just pull out. But we will we'll stay a part of the partnership, we'll do a minimum amount. Larry, it'll probably be business and only business for the foreseeable future, unless Jerry, you and others have some independent thing that you want to try. But we've got to maintain a presence there. And we've got to look at places where there are big pots of money. Now, some of you may remember the last time I talked about this. What did we all sort of agree on that was the highest priority? We don't want people to lose their jobs. Now, we may not be able to absolutely make that happen, but we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. And so, if that's the highest priority, then everything else has got to be looked at. For example, summer school. We budget about $1 million a year for summer school. Next summer, and I am talking purely hypothetical here because Galen has not come up with the final numbers. We may say next summer it'll be 600,000. And if we have cost savings for unfilled positions during the course of the year, we can potentially apply those to the summer school. All but 2 institutions in the A&M system, and we're one of those 2, use cost savings from unfilled positions to fund summer school. We are one of the only 2 institutions that actually budget for summer school. Now, frankly, I like budgeting for summer school because I like that, and because summer school is very important for us for a lot of reasons. But that's just an example of an area where there is a large pot of money that may have to be reduced. Another one is adjunct faculty. Adjunct faculty is critical for a lot of our operations, but if we was going to have to make a choice between full-time faculty and adjunct faculty, I think we know what the decision's going to be. So that's another area that we have to take a look at. One area in 2000, last year, we spent well over $600,000 as an institution in travel. We are pushing 500,000 at the moment, and we'll very likely go over 500,000. In a time like this, travel is going to have to be reduced. Now, I know that's a special concern to faculty, especially those faculty who are going out and doing presentations and the research and so forth. I'm not saying it's going to be eliminated. But for things like activities where a whole department has gone to a conference in the past, there may be 1 or 2 people who go to a conference and come back and report to everybody else what was occurring. So those are the big areas. Now, Bridget, I have to pick on Bruce a little bit. Again, I'm just talking theoretically, so don't jump up and throw something. We could potentially, Bridget may argue the point, and I'll give her the opportunity at another time. But we could potentially save costs by doing things like reducing the library hours. And we'll have to take a close look at that. The thing I want you all to understand is this is doable. This is not something that is going to damage the institution forever. It is not something that's going to be easy to do. It will have to be done. The way it will be done best is if we do it cooperatively. And that we're working together, and I know a lot of you out there, especially cost center managers, have already been thinking about how do we lower costs, how do we possibly restructure what we're doing. We may find that it's time when we made some good creative decisions that will be of benefit to us in the long run. But it is the situation in which we find ourselves. And we're not alone. If we were in San Antonio right now, we would be saying, how are we going to fund all those new students we just admitted because we know it's happening? When we've lost $4 million per year from the special items that funded the faculty to teach those students. Those are the kinds of challenges that are out there. So I'm confident that we will get there, and that we will get there doing minimal, hopefully no damage to positions. Now, positions that are vacant, positions that have been vacant for a long time, and stay vacant for an even longer time, depending on where we are. And all of us are going to have to do what I have already done. You know, we're in the process, we were in the process of trying to hire a director of marketing communications. And that money is still currently in the budget, but Galen knows that it's on the block if it needs to be. We will do the best we can to piece it together. Between Dr. Close and my staff, we have done a reasonably good job of late putting things out there and getting notice for this institution. We can do it in somewhat different ways than we've done it in the past. But if you're creative enough and if you're committed enough, You will be able to find ways to make these things work without simply scratching your head and saying, well, we just can't do it, we just can't do it. Because there is one other big concern out there. If we were to say, and since Dr. Farmer's sitting here, I'll pick on Dr. Farmer. If Larry were to say, I just can't make these adjustments, I can't make these adjustments without cutting back significantly on the number of courses that we're offering, that puts us in another hole. Because we will have some kind of formula by the time we go into the next legislative session. And semester credit hours will continue to be part of driving that formula. So if we suddenly have a dramatic drop in semester credit hours, we will already be behind the 8 ball going to the next legislative session. Now, guys, there is not going to be anything that's going to come along in the next 2 years that's going to change this. Yes, there's going to be a special session, but it's going to be about everything from sunset bills to bathrooms to, I don't know, whatever the governor decides he's going to allow to be brought up. The primary reason we're going into a special session is that there's always a sunset process during legislative sessions, and there are a number of agencies that haven't been approved, and many of them are very critical agencies. And they were, in effect, held hostage in an effort to get other bills passed. And so the sunset review was never completed. It must be completed. And so that's the number one priority that the governor has. And it's totally up to the governor as to what else he will allow. But we've seen the list already. I've seen the list of his items. There is nothing about higher education on that list. So there is not going to be any intervention for us between now and 2 years. Everything that we do, how we do it, and how we manage this is going to be in our hands. But then it's always been in our hands, guys. It's the way it's been since this school started. It's always been in our hands. That isn't changing. I am not concerned by that. I am encouraged by that. Rather than have somebody come in here and do this for us, we are allowed to do it ourselves. Now the A&M system has taken a step to try to help us to some degree. Unfortunately, it doesn't help us on some of the big items that would have to do with paying faculty and staff salaries. We get funding each year from the system for capital project or capital purchases. What's the best way to say that? Capital funding. Which means buying computers, buying furniture, doing repairs, those kinds of things. Again, it's kind of like the benefits money. Can't be spent for anything else. It comes from the Permanent University Fund, which is that big fund that the Senate beat both the UT and A&M systems over the head with regularly during the session. You have all this oil money. Why aren't you using it to fund those regional institutions? And I've heard more than one senator say, I heard one just yesterday say it, if those universities want to have these, or if those university systems want to have all of these different units, then they need to be prepared to pay for it. Big problem. By statute, that permanent university fund money cannot be spent for the purposes of hiring faculty. It can only be spent for capital projects. We built Warrior Hall on permanent university funds. And it is important for us because one of the things rolling around, or all the things rolling around in my head felt like a bowling alley for a while. Was how in the world are we going to put, Laura, all that new science laboratory money that we, or science laboratory equipment that we're gonna need in that third building. That we're gonna have to somehow take it out of our hands. Now, when we first started, Galen wasn't at 500,000 a year that we were given early on. In the last biennium, they raised it to $1 million a year. And I just got notification 2 days ago from the chancellor's office in Billy Hampton that they're gonna raise it to $2 million a year, for the next 2 years. Now that should solve that problem. We shouldn't have any problem buying computers. Shouldn't have any problem replacing things that break. But it doesn't solve the other issue of operations. So I just want you to be aware of that. And I appreciate it very much. I told them I appreciate it very much because it does address some major issues. And we can keep as much funding as possible focused on people as opposed to things. So we will go forward over the coming days, sometime before a week from Friday, and try to get this budget to a point to where we're willing to submit it. Because on the week of August 8th, somewhere around there, isn't that right? We gotta go defend it in front of the Board of Regents. And if we're asking for an exceptional increase to FTE, we will have to defend it. And I'm hoping we'll get a sympathetic hit, given all that's happened to everybody. But you can never guarantee that. You got 9 individuals up there, sometimes seeing things from 9 different perspectives. And so you never know for sure. But that is the process that we will go through. One last thing, and then I'll try to answer the questions that you have. What happens between now and the next legislative session? There will be a special committee convened. Supposed to have a membership put together by September to take up the whole picture of funding higher education. There has been some promising discussion, including from at least one of the senators who served on the conference committee for the budget bill, that smaller developing institutions must be given special attention. And they must be given a level of funding that will help them continue to grow and develop. Suggestion might be you get a certain level of funding up until you got 5,000 students, and then another level till you get to 10, and maybe another level by the time you get to 15, it's gone. Thing that never happened with the transition funding was there was no mechanism for reduction. We took a big hit. A lot of you are in this room. We're not here when we took that big hit. About the second year of our existence, we took a big hit in that transition funding. And we were so small at the time that we were able to manage that without a lot of trouble. But as we've grown larger, those kinds of hits become a little harder for us to do. Thing that I said in every testimony that I gave, and will continue to say, greatest damage to us would be losing the momentum that we have built for this institution. And I know our summer enrollment is down. That was not really driven by budget cuts. That was driven by the fact that we loaded up last summer because we were in a base year. And we didn't load it up this summer. But the number that's encouraging right now, I didn't look this morning, but I look every morning, and I will look when I get back in the office, is how are we doing with fall enrollment? And we've been steadily so far, I know it probably won't stay at that level, but we have been steadily at a double-digit increase compared to a year ago. Now the question will become bigger and bigger and bigger about if we have to start cutting back on adjunct faculty, and we have to start reducing sections. How do we maintain the numbers? And those are discussions I'm going to let the deans get their arms around. And how that might go. We'll try to do this by making sure that we've engaged everybody who's going to be affected in any way. But ultimately, decisions are going to have to be made, and ultimately, whether they work or they don't work, I'm the one that's got to take responsibility for it. And so if we get down to the end, and there's some indecision about whether this should be done or not done, I will make the decision if I have to make it. I would much prefer that we've done it in cooperation and in agreement. But if a decision has to be made because we've got to get the budget done, that's part of my job. Okay, giving you a whole lot of stuff, most of it not good, but the good part is this. I've already told you. It's in our hands, guys. It's always been in our hands. This is a special place. It is a challenging place. When you came here, you should have known it was going to be a challenging place. It's a place that makes you feel really, really good about the advances that we're making. It's a place that makes you scratch your head from time to time, saying, how in the world are we going to do this? And we've got limited resources. But it's what building a university in these times was inevitably going to face these kinds of challenges. We'd done this 20 or 25 years ago, maybe it would have been a different scenario. But here we are, right here, right now. And our ability to move forward is going to be dependent on how we all adjust to what's coming. If someone were to come to me this afternoon and say, you know, this is really not what I signed on for, and I'm real uncomfortable, and I'm going to have to look for employment somewhere else, I'd be happy to say, I understand. You need help, support to do that, we'll be happy to provide it for you. But guys, I'm hoping all of you, really, most of you for sure, are willing to make the commitment we've always made to building this place. That's why we came. It was never going to be easy. And I keep reminding the community, when we got that second building built and the enrollment was surging, you know, I got those feelings from some of our community leaders that, oh, they're over the hump now. They've got it down. Believe me, this has been a stark reminder that the same kind of intensity that they had to use when they were trying to get this place approved is the same kind of intensity that's going to have to be here for the foreseeable future if we want to keep this place growing and building. Okay. Who's brave enough to ask a question? Yes.
When will we know who can hire people for the fall faculty positions?
Faculty can be hired for the fall. Positions that you have vacant can be filled at this point. The hiring freeze that we're under right now did not affect fall. And hopefully the hiring freeze will end August 31st. That we're currently on.
So we can advertise now. If somebody is leaving at the end of summer, we can advertise for that position.
Yes.
And just as I'll use that to remind you of something I said earlier, and just kind of an example of kinds of adjustments that we may find ourselves making. If we have a position vacant in any area, faculty, staff, doesn't matter. The savings from that are not necessarily going to stay in that department. They may very well be moved to where there are other places where they're needed, like summer school or some other need. And we will be monitoring that closely. And you also know another major change is about to take place at this institution. Gayleen, who knows this place inside and out, and he's been absolutely superb at getting us through these kinds of situations, will be leaving and retiring and relaxing.
Not doing budget.
And the hiring process will continue. We'll start interviewing about 3 candidates coming in. I think they're all very strong. We think at least one of them is particularly strong. And hopefully we will be able to find somebody. We planned it out so that there will be a month overlap between Galen and the new person. I was asking Galen yesterday when she was going over these numbers. I said, Galen, are you going to be able to explain this to the new person coming in? All of these ins and outs, and got to move this over here, we got to move that over there in order to make this thing work. She said, I've taken lots of notes. And I will well, I'll say it's a her, because all 3 candidates are hers. I will give her my phone number. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
We have at least 2 faculty members in our department who are on contract, who were anticipating moving into a tenure track position at the end of their contract. Will that be interrupted with this, or?
I don't know. I don't know.
Are you talking about visiting faculty or?
I don't know, I know we're on 4 faculty each full-time rows, I think we both had 2 years on.
We have, okay. All right, Larry says we don't know yet. And we don't know yet. Because we had several visiting faculty lines in the East Williamson County Higher Education funding. All but 2 of those have already been basically eliminated. And those are decisions that we'll have to make as we go forward. Yes, sir.
Question on the capital funding. Is that available for only physical assets, or is that also available for service support for, say, outsourcing in the case of facilities, technology, etc.?
No.
Strictly physical?
It is for renovations and capital equipment.
Yes.
Was there any talk, as has been done in some other states, of just canceling summer school across the board at state schools?
Well, that would never be done statewide. That would always be an individual institution's decision, because we were all affected differently. Some of us are dealing with 10% cuts, some of us are dealing with no cuts. Our decision will be, I certainly would not want to eliminate summer school, but we may have to cut back on summer school. And we're not quite there yet as to decide what that would be. And what we may end up doing is saying something like, we will set aside X number of dollars. I told you we've had $1 million, let's say we set aside $600,000 for this summer. If cost savings occur because of unfilled positions and we want to channel that money to summer school, then we could do that, and maybe we have $700,000. Of course, people who are scheduling how many more classes need to be taught and whether you can be sure you're going to have a teacher for those classes, those things would be part of the challenge. But I would not anticipate here or anywhere else complete elimination of summer school. It would be especially detrimental for us. Other questions? As I've said before, I can't sing, can't dance, and can't tell jokes. There will not be, what happened? Once we get the numbers lined up where we think we can justify them, because keep in mind, we've got to be able to justify them when we go before the board. Then we will be sharing with everybody here's the impact. Some of your areas, you may see virtually no impact at all. But surely there will be impact in some other areas. And because the one approach I would never take, never believed in taking is, well, we need to cut 6%, so let's just cut 6% off of everything. Well, given the way these numbers are structured and what you can use and what you can't use, you just can't do it that way. Plus, there are some operations that are absolutely vital and we cannot cut. We're thin as it is, you know that, I know that. But I tell you again, guys, it's who we are, it's what we're doing. It's part of this institution. You gotta be willing to take it on if you're gonna be. I was very thinking about the last staff council. Last meeting I had with the executive committee for the staff council, and I went over some of this stuff. Before we left, Larry said, "Would you mind if I said a little prayer?" I said, "Larry, I don't mind at all." So he did. And he said, maybe a miracle will occur. But folks, it's not up there. It's out there. You are the miracle. There's going to be one. It will never be in those numbers. And yes, I think your prayer was answered. Because we've already, and I know we haven't had a chance to get across with everybody, but we've already been seeing the kind of commitment and the kind of cooperation that it's going to take to move us forward. Any other questions? Please, and I mean this as sincerely as I can say it to you. If you have questions that you want to ask me, you want to ask, hold your hand up, this crowd, come see me. Be happy to talk to you, be happy to share anything with you. Give you all these numbers if you want them. I may try to make sure that we send out that sheet right there, because that sheet does summarize it. You can certainly have the bill pattern if you want it, but it's more confusing. This one right here really breaks down exactly where the hits go. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you for coming.